I'm here with the Thunderous One. We're going to be talking about Mr. Aleister Crowley. Now, Crowley was considered the greatest Satanist of the 20th century. And of course, as we've discovered, he loved Islam. And as we've discovered from the Fabian Society, who were also deeply into the occult, we also learned that this deep state, if you will, also was deeply in love with Islam, highly respected Islam. And Crowley and the members of the Fabian Society detested weak Christianity. But they, of course, loved the virtues of Islam. And so this tells us that these Satanists, they feel that there's a great compatibility between Islam and Satanism. Don't take my word for it. We're going to see what Crowley has to tell us. And so far, he's told us plenty. So good evening, guys. How are you doing? And what are your thoughts on this whole Crowley loves Islam vibe?
Yeah, for me, it's quite interesting to see that there are all these links to people that that people have been told a different story of who they were, and then you dig into the real cases, and we see all of these links. And it's kind of weird that they all seem to have such great fascination and admiration for Islam. It's really bizarre.
Yeah. Thunderous, any thoughts from your end?
Well, hi everybody. It's only appropriate that I identify myself as a guy that's full of fire, zeal, and sex appeal, considering that the subject is Aleister Crowley. But that being said, what amazes me is one, I wasn't aware of the link to Islam. But yet again, if I'm going on with the theme that we've been discussing for the past couple of weeks, are the seeds sown in the past, particularly towards the end of the 20th century, to where we are now, and that is all the books and things that are printed, the roots of the Fabian Society, and now we're discussing Aleister Crowley, which is around about, I forget when he wrote the book, but it'll be late 18th century. So, yeah, sorry, late
19th, early 20th century sort of guy.
Yeah. Yeah, so it seems interesting that all the influences that we have in the world today are sown 150 years ago.
Yeah, what's also interesting for me, of course, is, we see the rise of hatred against Jews. This is coming back. However, all of these accusations that people make, we can find them far worse, far more direct, far more explicit, far more detailed in Islam. And somehow Islam always gets surpassed. It's always been the fault of one particular group. But here we can see that the most radical, the most anti-Christian members of Western culture in the last 150, 200 years, all of them detest Christianity, are viciously anti-Christian, but all of them embrace Islam. All of them embrace these Islamic principles. All of them love Muhammad. And this just shows to me the compatibility of Islam with things like Satanism, socialism/communism, its compatibility with mass genocides, its compatibility with totalitarianism, oppression of women. This is clearly the kind of ideology that just fits well. Well, Islam being the kind of ideology that actually fits very well with the worst movements we have seen in the West, and seems to be part and parcel of their inspiration.
Yeah, can I just add on to that, Lloyd, that Islam seems to fit as well the worst side of human nature, one of them being lust and the other one being rage and anger and an inclination of the flesh towards violence.
Yeah. JC, any thoughts?
No, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, so shall we just pick up where we left off the last time and just talk about this? So we'll do about 20 or so slides, roughly 19 to 20 slides. And then, this is going to be very interesting. And let's just dive in. So we ended off here the last time on the, one page ahead. But Aleister Crowley was a British occultist. He was raised in the movement until his father's death. So that is he was raised in the Plymouth Brethren, right? This was a heretical Christian offshoot. It was very heavily Gnostic, right? Now, Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. Now we always hear, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. In fact, do what you please. Do as you want. In other words, worship yourself. Worship your own desire. Follow your own desire. That is the whole of the law. Now, of course, that means that is purely the law of the jungle. The strongest survives. The strongest oppresses the others and imposes. This is the imposition of will. This is not respect and tolerance of getting along with others. Love is the law, but it says love under will. So love is suppressed under will. So where does this take us? So this is his most famous and frequently quoted phrase. And he speaks of the pursuit of your true purpose, your true will. Now, this sounds innocuous, but as we'll see, it is not. So we have to align our actions and desires with our true will while emphasizing the principle of love as the guiding principle. And I would say this is love of self. This would be extreme narcissism. Now, love and the will is the love of the jungle. It's the law of the jungle. And we can go to these couple of websites here, hermetic.com, Crowley, right? And this libotl. We can have a look. And this is what they explain to us. On the surface, there's little distinction between the new law and the canon of anarchy. How is the law to be fulfilled in the case of two boys who want to eat the same orange? What if you want the same goal? What if it's two governments that want the same piece of land? What if it's any kind of conflict on a global scale and you've got a government that's infected with this ideology? But since only one boy at most can eat the orange, it is evident that one of them is mistaken in supposing that it is essential to his will to eat it. The question is to be decided in the good old way by fighting for it. So this is the law of warfare, the law of conquest, the law of defeating others, the law of bloodshed. Any thoughts from you guys on this? Because this is not love. This is violence. This is permission to commit violence for your own will. For your own benefit. Yeah.
Could this be interpreted as well, fighting for the flesh or the will of the flesh? So if the will is it has an inclination towards, say, sexual matters, whether they be hetero or deviant, then your inclination is to give into the flesh for it or fight the flesh for it.
Yeah, this is will. This is not something like will that submits to God. And I don't mean in the Islamic sense. I mean that ask yourself, for instance, something very interesting I read some years ago was a study on psychopathy. And this psychologist stated that what separates good people from psychopaths, violent psychopaths, is that good people will ask themselves, what would my mother want? What would my father want? Or what would my brother, or someone who's influential in their life, someone that they wanted to please because that person's respect and was important to them. Or they would ask, what would God want of me? What would Jesus want? Right? How would Jesus want me to act? In other words, they submit their will to a higher authority outside of themselves that they look up to and respect. Here, we have the psychopathic view is, what do I want? What does my will say? And that is purely selfish. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, and it looks like it's all about go and take it. It just says, if you want something, you go and take it. And if your will is stronger, if you can overpower the other person, then you win. That reminds me of the caliphs of old, particularly when they would win battles, they would say, well, you see, this is actually because God is on my side. It's almost like finding excuses to just go to war or to do these sort of things. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
My inclination straight away when you was going through this was to go to the book of Galatians chapter 5, where it talks about the works of the flesh and the works of the spirit. So there's a contrast between the two in the latter part of the book of Galatians chapter 5, and where the Bible is asking us to work against the inclination of the flesh rather. Aleister Crowley is basically proactively saying, no, give in to the flesh, stop that fight, but give into it.
No, agreed. I mean, think of, and we see this especially amongst a certain demographic of late. We see this in videos around the world. They walk into a store, they grab a bag or a basket, they load up with stuff, and they just walk on out, right? We do see this amongst a particular demographic very often, and that is love and the will. Do what thou wilt. And of course, nobody wants to fight them. And as we will see, if no one is willing to fight you, then they must be your slaves. So this is just getting away with what you can, violating others' other laws and violating the rights of others, or just what is socially normative, what is binding society together, right? So the fighting should be done chivalrously with respect to the courage of the vanquished. As brothers, fight ye. In other words, there's only this difference from our present state of society, that manners are improved. Sure, whatever you say. There are many persons who are naturally slaves. I thought slavery was bad, but apparently slavery is good. Who have no stomach to fight, who tamely yield to anyone who is strong enough to take it. These persons cannot accept the law. This is also understood and provided for in the book of the law. The slaves shall serve. So in other words, those people who walk in and just steal things, they are not bad people. They're the ones who are, their love is under will, and you are their slaves. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, first of all, anybody that naturally says no stomach to fight, one has to bear in mind, and you guys are probably aware of this, and I'm sure many people listening to the show will accept this as a truth, that some human beings are prone towards, or have a tendency or a disposition towards violence, and they seem to be very natural towards it. But many human beings aren't. Many human beings just want to live a simple life. It is not to suggest that they are weak in any way. It's just that that's the way that we've been designed. We've been designed to not be violent or aggressive. And let's be honest, some human beings, no matter what their size, because I've seen very big men, but very incapable of defending themselves. So, and it's just the mental part of our mind and the way that we are as human beings individually, that it's not that we're weak. It's just that we're not been designed to fight. So this, for me, is almost legitimizing the bullying and the intimidation and negative actions towards those from which that you can derive benefit from or exploit.
As Vilna said, the woke. I mean, if you look at the Russians, you look at communism, socialism, it's a form of jihad, because revolution, they have to use infiltration, subversion, and revolution to push their particular agenda, to bring communism to the world. Muslims must use jihad to bring the Islamic revolution to the world. It's all the same thing. And this is just psychopathic use of violence for their own benefit, for their own beliefs. He says, it is possible for any apparent slave to prove his mastery while fighting his oppressors, even as now. But he has this additional chance in our system that his conduct will be watched with kindly eye by our authorities. Think of two-tier Britain, where certain groups can commit all sorts of acts of violence. I mean, we had recently in the UK, someone used an edged weapon, and they placed it into his body, in his neck, and he called to the police for help. The police arrested him and let him bleed out on the pavement, where he is no longer with us. And of course, the reason that he was arrested was that the perpetrator who used the weapon to place it into his neck had said that this man had committed a racism. So he had committed a racism, and therefore the police arrested not the one with the sharp pointed object, but the man that had committed the racism, and they let him bleed to death on the street. And then later on, they found that the man who said that he had had a racism committed against him had seemingly also the possession of the other man's telephone. So somehow there might have been a certain theft involved, and who knows, but apparently it is okay to do things like this, and the police will aid and abet you.
That whole story, I think maybe we'll go into it next week, but there's one part there that when the police arrested him, they put him in handcuffs as well.
Yes.
And it's only, I dread to think what would have happened, because when he was confronted by the guy with the certain religious headpiece, if he didn't have, he pulled out his phone and started recording. Had he not done that, I dread to think what the situation would be now.
Yeah, shocking. So, but this is how it is. So think about it. Maybe these kinds of laws and rules apply to those that take what they want. And sadly, though, we at some point are going to have to fight back. I mean, what do you do if this is the enemy that you're facing, and the law is clearly coming down on the side of those who practice this kind of wanton violence without consequence? Okay, so love under will is the love of the jungle. So you may now ask, as they write, as Crowley's people write, how such arrangements are possible. There's only one solution. it has always been admitted that the ideal form of government is that of a benevolent despot. So a benevolent despot, so a kindly, totalitarian, oppressive government, a dictatorial government that looks kindly on people who will use violence because those aren't slaves. Isn't that fascinating? And despotism has only fallen because it is impossible in practice to assure the goodwill of those in power. The rules of chivalry and those of Bushido in the East gave the best chance to develop rulers of the desired type. Chivalry failed because it was confronted with new problems. Today, we know perfectly what those problems were and are able to solve them. And they said here, those knights who did not hesitate to add the wisdom of the East, yeah, like Islam, in other words, Sufism, to their own interpretation of Christianity, and represented in that time a movement towards the light of learning and science, which had been brought to fruition in our own times with the labors of the Orientalists, right? And Madame Blavatsky, she's certainly very influential to various people, especially certain groups in Germany, for instance, before World War II. To say nothing of such philosophers as Schopenhauer and so on. So yeah, we need to reinterpret Christianity through an Islamic lens, and we need to add occultism to the mix. And once you start adding this crazy woman to the mix, you're going to get lots of crazy ideas that fueled groups like, those with certain failed painters. Okay, any thoughts before I move on?
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
So, violent elitism. So on the surface, this sounds liberating and individualistic, emphasizing personal freedom. However, Crowley's interpretations become hierarchical, almost Darwinian framework. In fact, it's very, very Darwinian, where conflict over desires, like two boys wanting the same orange, are resolved through violence, with the victor presumed to be aligned to their true will. So this is might makes right. These are the worst of human behavioral principles. These are the worst kinds of behavioral guidelines you can have. This is not mutual respect. This is dominance through violence. So this is a misuse of love. It is deceptive, right? Because you're justifying aggression, you're justifying violence and domination and slavery, right? And this is a false interpretation of compassion. So do understand that just as these elitists, these Islamically influenced occultists, these anti-Christian occultists misuse the term love, which we would understand in a Christian sense, they also then misinterpret, misuse, misapply, and misrepresent and distort things like empathy, compassion, mutual care. So while we might have the same vocabulary, we happen to have extremely different dictionaries. So yeah, this is not love. This is sanctioned violence dressed up as philosophy. So love does not involve dominating or subjugating others. Let me bring up something here that's going to be of relevance to us. So please understand that this is something that is now endemic in the world. For Christians, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. It never fails. So, yeah, that is what we would consider love. But these people, this is not love. And slaves shall serve, and the master class, the elites, rule over them, is a worldview where power, not love, is the true currency.
And who is love in the Bible? Who is love?
God is love.
There's the point. So who are they working against?
Against God.
And it's inverse against the Bible yet again.
Yeah, this is satanic. This is just pure Satanism. So understand, this is genuine Satanism, and this is why Islam is so compatible with Satanism. If you take one thing away from this, understand that Islam is compatible with the lowest, the worst of human desires. Satanism, totalitarianism, they hate Christianity, they love Islam. Okay, so jihad is a spiritual virtue. So Crowley's work promotes a system where might makes right. So fighting resolves disputes. The victor is presumed to embody the true will. And this is not sophisticated. It is not chivalry. It is justification, as Thunderer said, for bullying. Slaves who don't fight are inferior and must serve the strong That's elitist and dehumanizing. But this is the way that they demoralize you. This is how they impose their will over you. And at some point, you may need to fight back. Understand that sometimes, like socialism, you can vote your way into it, but you have to shoot your way out of it. Now, this philosophy doesn't just tolerate violence, it celebrates it as a path to spiritual mastery. So this is really not an intellectual thing. This is purely just raw violence and about control through violence. It's not about mutual respect or growth. It's about winners and losers with no room for those who reject conflict, unless you want to be a slave. So it takes a universally positive term to mask an ideology that anyone sane would find disgusting. By pairing love with will, he creates an illusion, a falsehood, which has this supposed balance and harmony. But the system rewards aggression and dismisses the weak as unworthy. So, and this is a rejection of Christianity. It's a rejection of Christ. But do you understand that Islam influenced his view of strength, which is violent jihad, as a spiritual virtue? Remember, he thought Jesus was weak, and he thought Muhammad was strong, warrior-like. And in fact, Hitler made very similar comments and statements himself. Any thoughts, guys?
Yeah, on if I may, on the whole thing about the words and about how they change the meaning of words. In the Quran actually says in Surah 4:46 and in other places that there are those who twist the meaning of words beyond its proper usages. So that is a condemnation of playing with words. Yet in Islam, everything is about playing with words. And every single time that we see a group like very anti-Christian, this is what we see. They will use the same vocabulary that we all use, and we know what words mean, but to them, they have made a new meaning. So it's almost like they have their own code when they are talking about the stuff. And we see that throughout Sharia. So it doesn't surprise me seeing these other people and groups and occultists doing the same thing, changing the meanings of words.
Yeah, that's what Marx did. It's what all of these Gnostics do. It's what all of these groups do. They twist words and they impose their own meanings upon them, and they destroy what we have as a culture come to over thousands of years to determine as meanings. Okay, so man is a god is also the atheist position. I've covered this on my talks on atheism many, many times, where they see themselves as the pinnacle of creation. Man is a god or becoming a god. So, so his reinterpretation of the Shahada as there is no God but man, because he reinterpreted the Shahada as there is no God but God. There is no God but man, reflects a radical humanism. Now, this is a position that other Islamic scholars in the past have come to as well. But Crowley uses mystical Islamic imagery, Muhammad as a magus, Saladin in OTO rituals, and even the Sufis are violent. People don't realize, but Sufis are known for extreme violence in the past. So the civilized audience that hears about Crowley's philosophy will reject and recoil in disgust at the idea that fighting determines worth or that slaves must serve. So his philosophy isn't just contradictory, it's a deliberate misdirection that uses the language of love to sanctify violence and domination. So that would be somewhat off topic. Okay, so let's not discuss that now, Very. This is not of relevance right now. So, yeah. So the Brethren's focus on sin and submission drove Crowley to reject Christian slavishness, seeking strength-based spiritualities like Islam. Right? Crowley's love is not compassion, but a pretext for asserting your will. But ultimately, it would be the will of the opposer of Christianity, the will of the opposer of God, or the Satan. And so he deceptively cloaks all of his philosophy in positive rhetoric, right? And yeah, who wants to be a slave who has to serve? So we need to ask ourselves, how many people in government, in Europe, in the rest of the world, follow this philosophy to one degree or another? So Crowley claims that the Knights Templar were unjustly destroyed by king and pope who felt threatened by the Knights' progressive blend of Eastern wisdom, that's Sufism, with Christianity. I've spoken about this before. Everyone makes the claim that, well, you see, the Templars were the good guys and the priests and the popes and the king and everyone was the bad. Well, once you look into the history of the Templars became more and more detested, disliked, even hated and distrusted. and they were effectively the bankers of the day. So when it's convenient, they attack the Pope and the kings, and everyone's bad, and the Pope and the Templars were good. But of course, bankers are bad and financial control is bad, but they were the Rothschilds of the day, if you will. And yeah, but they were good, except so when it's convenient, they become the good guys. And of course, we're not supposed to notice the fact that they were actually effectively Islamic. They were heretical. They were combining their beliefs, their Christian beliefs, supposedly Christian beliefs, with Islamic views. And of course, you can find all sorts of histories that forget to touch on this. But once you look into many of the histories, you find that they were importing Islamic ideas into Christianity. Pioneers of learning and science. We'll later on, we'll have a look at this idea of science taken from Islam, which is not the Western concept. It's not the Western idea. He implies that their legacy inspired modern Orientalists, right, and philosophers. So in other words, the Sufis inspired the Templars, and this inspired modern Orientalists. So in other words, they were reacting against Christianity, they were reacting against the things that established the West. So now you're finding Islam also involved in what's undermining the West. Templars' Eastern influence, Islamic Sufi, prefigured the mystical drift traced in Luther, Calvin, and Michael Servetus. Of course, everyone speaks of Calvin, and he had Michael Servetus burned at the stake. What few people realize is that Michael Servetus was promoting the Qur'an as superior to the Bible. He was promoting Muhammad as superior to Jesus, as the superior example, and he was effectively all but Muslim. So he was also combining Christian and Muslim ideas, and he was heavily influenced by Muslims who were fake Christians in Spain. Any thoughts before I go on, guys?
Yeah, a couple of things to say. First is I had always seen Islam during my studies as that thing which was all the way over there in the Middle East, and it's only now that it's coming to the West. So we're starting to look at all of these things. But when you're actually showing this, starting to see all of that evil influence that was actually, bleeding through into European minds, and here we are. So that's one thing. The other one, very directly from the Quran keeps saying again and again, those who believe and do good deeds, again and again, because that was basically taken from Judeans, Christians, and so on. The thing is that then they redefine that. If you were to read the book neutrally, you would think, oh, the Quran is commanding people to be good, to give to charity. But then they will rewrite what doing good deeds mean. And it means basically go on jihad and do all of these things. They attack the infidel. And basically they just change something that would be clear. Doing good things means doing good things, not going and attack those who don't believe. They change the meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a really good point that JC has raised there. If I can just add on to that, if I may, it's a bit like when Muslims say salam or assalamu alaikum, they're suggesting that their greeting is one of peace. But what people don't understand is it's only a greeting that you would say to another Muslim. You would not say it to a kuffar or an idolater, because they don't wish peace on anybody that's not Muslim. So the understanding, there's a history behind the understanding. So JC is bang on point there, I think.
Yeah, I've seen videos where someone asks a Muslim, so Islam is a religion of peace, right? And they say, yes. They said, so can you wish peace on a Jew right now? And they refuse to. They just won't. They won't do it. They won't say it.
Yeah, that's right. Because peace can only be on other Muslims. It cannot be on non-Muslims. Because the non-Muslim is the worst of creatures.
Yeah. It's kind of shocking. But So the Knights Templar from 1119 to 1312 were active in the Crusades. They encountered Islamic culture in the Middle East, and they absorbed lots of Sufi mystical ideas like divine unity and unmediated spirituality. There's a scholar called Al-Khalaj that influenced them, amongst others. Okay. Now, this legacy of mysticism, inner experience, which is Gnosticism over church authority, parallels what we call these free spirit heresies of the 13th to 15th centuries. And these come before the Reformation. These are ideas, ideologies that penetrated into Europe, especially Spain and Italy, also Eastern Europe. But let's think of Italy, that's going to be very influential here in the 13th to 15th centuries. They also saw direct union with God, right? Now, direct union would mean instead of having to have a church, instead of it being a priest, you say, no, I'm talking to God. I've got him on speed dial. I have a direct connection to God. I don't need no book. I don't need no priest. I don't need no church. I don't need no anything, because I'm a Gnostic now, right? So these are ideas that they took, which infected the West and which influenced ultimately the creation of the Reformation movement, right? Now, also, we'll see this in Peret's Mirror, which is a book published in 1296. And when you look at all of these ideas, in the future, I'm going to be talking about these philosophies and all of these movements that prefigured the Reformation. You're going to find that they all are heretical, and they come before the Reformation. And then the people that influenced the reformers, the people that taught the reformers or were members of their families, taught this to the reformers, and the reformers then adapted these ideas and said, hey, we've got a new take on Christianity. But I'm going to go into length on that in the near future. So this mystical thread, potentially Sufi influence, connects Luther's inner man, right? Because the inner man knows. It's just a sense of knowing, right? And he speaks of this in the Theologica Germanica, which is a mystical text, which is effectively, should we say, Gnostic. It's about, because I have a feeling. You see, I'm inspired by God. I don't need no man to tell me. I don't need no anyone to tell me anything. Calvin speaks of a mystical union. I just know that these books don't belong in the Bible. Once you look at their strongest arguments, you start to find that it's really based on because I say so, damn it, right? And inner secret testimony. This was between Luther and Calvin as well. And Servetus had a Tawhid-like oneness. Let's just say that the story we're told of the Reformation and how it formed is at best incomplete and at worst a total lie. And that's something that I want to take apart in the near future. Yes, Sandro. Just one second, Thunders. Yes, Joachim of Fiore is instrumental in this. He is highly instrumental in all of this. But so none of these are separate. But I'm touching on these indirectly. I don't want to get into too much depth because I want to cover this in depth in the future. Thunders, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask now, when I looked into Aleister Crowley years ago, one of the things that he was heavily involved in was sex magic or
Yes.
pharmakeia-induced magic. Now, you've mentioned a lot of words in there, like mysticism and Sufism and such, and Christian organizations or entities that were heavily influenced by certain individuals. One of the common, when you go to the book of Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 9 and 10, one of the things that Yahweh is warning against people is to not be involved in magic. It's one of the lists in Deuteronomy 19. I think it's Deuteronomy 18, 9 to 12, something like that. Magic or the occult or looking into star signs and things was something that, in God's own words, he uses the word detestable, and it's a theme that goes all the way through to the book of Revelation. Would you say then that a lot of the things that are negative influences are a direct or indirect product of magic or seances or things of like dealing with the occult in a very direct way?
Actually, you know what? Yes, I would 100% agree with you, because I was planning to, although it's actually a few slides from now, just a handful of slides from now, I was planning to go through some of the kind of sciences that Crowley is influenced by from Islam, right? And let me just find the reference. So there's quite a number of them, but one of the sciences that is influencing them is the science of astrology, of divination through the stars, right? So I've got it here somewhere. So it's all divination through the stars. So when Crowley speaks of science, but let me get to that, then I can try and get my thoughts more together. But yes, the whole idea of divination and magic and of dabbling in that kind of thing, yes, I would say there's, and that's a very strong Islamic influence because he loved Islam. We'll talk much more about that as we go. Yeah, so is Thelema satanic? Yes, it rejects any kind of biblical morality. It promotes individualism over God's will and incorporates occult imagery like the great beast, 666. Violent elitism in Liber, right? Slaves shall serve, obviously opposes Christian love. We serve others. We don't make others become our slaves, right? There's a mutual level of cooperation there. So he exemplifies satanic individualism. We see this in LaVeyan Satanism's focus on personal desire. That's Anton LaVey, right? Crowley interprets the Shahada as no God but man, right? And this highlights, again, humanistic self-deification. You become God. And this is a view that is repeated by some atheists who've openly stated so. Levant Satanism and Thelema both emphasize individual will and self-assertion. Right? This is like a child throwing its toys out of the cot, like a 6-year-old with impulse control issues that just demands its own way, except it's willing to use violence. So now Satan becomes, in theory, a symbolic figure, but we've all been told that the greatest trick that the devil has ever pulled is to make people think he doesn't exist. So Thelema's Egyptian-inspired mysticism differentiates it somewhat. So the costumes are a little different. So Thelema does not openly worship Satanism, but indirectly, let's say it does. It promotes true will. It promotes pride and rejection of God. So you've got satanic individualism, right? And also it has a very Islamic perspective. So, yeah, and then also rooted in Crowley's defiance of Christian norms, Thelema shares a rebellious, self-focused spirit likened to Satanism, or linked to Satanism. So we see a harsh hierarchy of the strong and the weak. And Crowley's Islamic influence, with Muhammad as Magus, for instance, reinforces a subtle satanic ethos without explicit devil worship. So it doesn't openly do so, but it is certainly there. The framework is certainly satanic, even if it doesn't openly claim to worship Satan. But we can see the influence is there. Yeah?
Yeah, I was just thinking, when you go to the book of Genesis and God places the tree of knowledge of good and bad and says to Adam, don't eat from it, because if you eat from it, you will die. But then later on in chapter 3, verses 1-5, you find that Satan, hiding behind the snake, basically turns around and says, if you eat from this tree, you will be like God, knowing good and bad. And what people don't understand is the tree of knowledge, good and bad, didn't open their mind to new information they didn't have. It represented God's right to determine what is right and wrong. If they did not eat from it, they were showing by their own free will. God had the right to determine right or wrong. By eating from it, they themselves says, no, we ourselves will determine what is right and what is wrong. Now, the interesting thing is, Jesus in John 8:44 refers to Satan as the manslayer. Right? Satan has never killed anyone directly, but he uses lies to kill people. And you can, from what I'm looking at this, it's very much the same trick that he used with Eve, the same trick he used with Eve, where he says you can determine right from wrong yourself. You don't need God to tell you. In effect, you become your own God. And in your last paragraph point, it says Thelema shares a rebellious, self-focused spirit linked to Satanism. That's exactly what happened to Eve.
That's a very good point. Yeah, so it's subtle. It's a subtle drift, but it's dressed in this very fancy language and this very classically, I don't know, what would one say, sophisticated looking dress, sophisticated looking ceremonies. It looks really nice. But once you dig, this beautiful facade is actually very, very ugly. Anything from you, JC? You're so quiet at the back.
I'm just thinking a lot about this. One of the things, I don't know about Satanist groups, but most of the people who have done great evils in history, they thought they were the good guys of history. They didn't see themselves as evil at all. So the whole deception of changing good and evil and the perception of what is good and what is evil is really embedded in all of these things. When to any one of us, we would know what is good and what is evil. It's pretty much in our DNA. But these sort of groups, as well as truly evil people, they will convince themselves otherwise, that they are the heroes of the stories. Very weird.
Yeah, no, you're right. They just redefined good and evil, like Thunders was saying. So humanist Satanism, mostly atheistic. So humanism is another, we need to look, if we go back to pre the Reformation, you go back to the humanist movement, all the reformers were humanists. Please understand that's actually going to be very, very important. They all took on humanist names and identities. And prior to that, you had the Renaissance. And the Renaissance is not as squeaky clean as people think. A lot of ugly things there in the history that we need to look at. So LaVey Satanism is atheistic. Now, while Crowley and his movements don't explicitly say they worship the devil, they worship themselves, but their worship is opposed to God. So they are opposing. They are satanic in the sense that they are opposed to God. They're opposed to the law of God, the natural law of God. So LaVey, he also claims, no, we're atheists, right? And he describes his religion as a carnal religion, a religion of the flesh. And that's not just sexual, but think about the similarities to Crowley ideas, a religion of the flesh. And again, this is different in opposition to what God wants from us. So followers believe that all gods are fictitious and that ultimate importance is found in the self and pursuing self-interest. They are, in my talks on atheism, I discussed at length many atheists saying exactly the same things, identical words. So all of them ultimately are heading down the satanic path. So Satan is not a deity to venerate, they say, but a metaphor, the ultimate adversary of irrationality and religious belief. So the name Satan comes from the Hebrew, one who opposes. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on about this carnal religion of LaVey, for instance? Because Crowley was no different. He was extremely carnal. Yeah.
I will say that, well, I was an atheist for over 40 years. So listening to, for example, this conversation back then, I would have thought, well, these people are talking about, but you have to obey God. But God doesn't exist. Therefore, there is no difference between someone, trying to say that they follow God, other guys saying that they follow Satan or Allah or whatever it is. It's like they're all the same, because you as a human, you can actually sit down and think and then reason and come up with the right things to do. And of course, that was before, but this is the thinking process. Of course, that's not how it works at all. And now I can see the holes in that narrative. But that's pretty
Great.
much how it is. You decide what is good and wrong because you are a very good person that can differentiate good and evil.
Yeah, crazy, right? And also you said like, no, it doesn't matter. That's also called indifferentism. That's another heresy where all ideas are the same. All things are the same. Islam is exactly the same as Christianity, exactly this. No, they're not. No, they're not. I mean, that's just the destruction of reason. Yeah, an amazing turnaround there, JC.
Yeah, as well, when you really analyze it, it's just a replacement theory, isn't it? You're either worshiping God, all right, or if you're an atheist and you claim you don't have a belief in God, then you are following rules, but you're probably following certain rules by other men, what other men have said. Say, for instance, the government of the country that you may live in, they set in rules and you obey them. So if you're not worshiping God or following God, you're following other men. And if you're not even following other men, you're following what you yourself believe. So you yourself have become a God, because you're not subject to anyone, you're only subject to yourself. So you're either subject to yourself, you're subject to other men, or you're going to be subject to God. But because you deny God, you've become subject to other men. If not other men, then yourself.
Right. You're on fire today, Thunderous. Yeah. I mean, and this is very secular. Think of these ideas. They're very secular. We'll see that in a moment. But you wouldn't think that the secular nature of their beliefs are satanic, but really we're going to see. You can have secular symbolism. This is from LaVey again. You can have secular symbolism, ritual, and pageantry. So it's all about theater, right? And it's very effective and something that is part of the nature of the human animal. And they mean animal. You're not special. You're not elevated above the creatures that are, without the soul like you are, right? So the ritual chamber can be a place where you can dramatically perform what I call self-transformational psychodrama, right? Think of woke psychodrama. We release the emotions that we find would be injuring us in the regular pursuit of our happiness so we can then let them go. Yeah, you'll find videos of women in forests screaming into pillows, hacking trees down with whatever. So it's not that we're just looking for disorder, chaos, and to undermine Western values. So yeah, it's not just, as Satanists, it's not just that we're looking for disorder, because we want disorder, we want chaos, and we want to undermine Western values. Muslims also, through following the Sharia, undermine Western values, right? All sorts of movements in the West that we've imported en masse undermine Western values. So the Satanists do it and everyone else seems to do it. But yeah, weird how that works. In fact, we're trying to endorse for Enlightenment values. Oh, the Enlightenment. Like in the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, there were things that happened in the French Revolution that would put the Nazis to shame, right? These people acted in a manner that was so barbaric, the Nazis would cringe to do the same. It is an incredibly dark period in history. And there were two things that we need to understand about, and I've covered the French Revolution in depth, right, in real depth in my videos. It was socialist, it was a socialist movement, and it was an atheist movement. It was socialistic and atheistic, and it was brutal in a way that is hard to put in words. It was the most barbaric period one can think of. It brought out barbarism and the worst of human behavior in a way that the atrocities are beyond words. So understand that these Enlightenment values are the worst events in history, in our modern history, can be linked to the Enlightenment. And these ideas can be linked to Satanism. And these same ideas are very compatible with Islam. And they bring here, and he says, so we endorse Enlightenment values and we bring reason and respect for science into bettering the human condition. An atheist could easily say that. This is Lucian Greaves. He is the spokesperson for the Satanic Temple. Now, briefly, before I bring you guys back on for a second, so the Temple's 7 tenets, right? The Satanic Temple's 7 tenets speak to this worldview. They ask followers to act with compassion, to respect the freedom of others, and to take care that beliefs don't distort scientific facts. And now let's go have a look at these beautiful ideas that these Satanists promote. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
I will just point out that so the Enlightenment, it got a very nice name. There are lots of these things in history that they have such beautiful names, like, oh, you see, it looks like light has now come to you, but they don't really tell you about what really happened. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I was just exactly with the JC there. I love the words that those who are opposed to God use. They use enlightenment, they use reason. You know, that's one of the famous, sort of like one of the most common words, rather, that atheists will use. You know, we use reason, our power of reason, to understand that there is no God or why we're atheists. So it's what comment said earlier on. We may share the same vocabulary, but we don't share the same dictionary, which I think is a fantastic comment. But you're seeing evidence of it here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you, Panonsky Governor. €6 from you. It says atheists use takia, kitman, all the time. Good work. Thank you very much. Yes, I 100% agree with you. I have an extensive series on atheism. I've got many episodes going through the history of atheism, especially modern atheism, and it is very little different in many ways from the Satanism that we know today. It is very little different from jihad. So yeah, JC, let's share your screen before I move on. Yeah.
Yes, to show. So enlightenment is like, the word sounds very good, but this is what the reality sort of looks like. It doesn't feel very enlightened to me. Very barbaric, I'd say. Yeah,
they wanted to kill lots of people quickly, so they created that. Century Since, that series is one of the very best, Lord. Thank you, Century Since. Yeah, thank you. No, it was a horrific time. It's shocking what happened during this supposedly flowering of atheist thought. It was the most brutal, barbaric, disgusting events in history that many of the facts are still being suppressed today. It's not common knowledge. It was not a great event. It was okay. Well, let's have a look at the 7 fundamental tenets. You should strive to act with compassion, with empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. You must struggle for justice in an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. So you need to strive for social justice. And if you believe that your movement or your idea is just, then it should prevail over existing laws and institutions. In other words, ignore all the traditions, ignore all of the laws that came before, because you've got a better idea, you see. So impose your law and break all the rules, you see, because they're wrong and you're right. You're better than them. Your body is inviolable, subject to your own will alone. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forgo one's own, except unless they're doing something that you don't like, then you should fight them and harm them and impose your will upon them and make them your slave. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort the scientific facts to fit your beliefs. People are fallible. If you make a mistake, you should do your best to rectify it and resolve any harm that may have been caused. Unless, of course, you're a conservative, a Christian, unless you support Trump, in which case you're evil and you should be, someone should pull out their grandfather's, firearms from the cupboard and go get up on a roof and, aim at the neck, or, strike at their necks. Interesting that it was strike at their necks, and people like Charlie Kirk were struck in the neck. Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. So your sense of, your belief of, your Gnostic idea of what is right, your sense, the spirit, because I'm enlightened by the great spirit of compassion, of wisdom, and this must always prevail over the written or spoken word. This must always prevail over the Bible. What anyone says, do what the hell you want. That is satanic. Now, this, believe it or not, these are the core tenets of the Satanic Temple. Sounds wonderful. Would you guys have thought that these are the beliefs of the Satanic Temple?
The interesting thing with that is that if you remove objective theistic moral values, all of that list there is merely subjective. So in one of the points, it talks about coming to, I paraphrase, but coming to an agreement together. But whose agreement will you agree with if it's merely subjective? If there's no objective values, then it's merely subjective. And it will it'll have to be a power of might over right then, wouldn't it, as to whose subjective values you're going to succumb to.
Yeah, there's something very wrong with this. I mean, this is very wrong. What do you think, JC? I mean, this all sounds fantastic. This sounds exactly like the kind of moralizing talk you do from the woke or from atheists. So we literally, you can go to the Atheist Society website, to the Humanist Society website, and you can basically find almost identically word for word the very same ideas espoused as their religious beliefs.
Yeah, well, with the language, the moment that you actually read the spirit of compassion, I thought about the Holy Spirit. I thought they're using language that people would associate with different things, also wisdom. But it feels as well like these things would be given to you like this, but then there is a whole terms and conditions section, which is many books, defining everything in a way that would basically sound very different to all of these. Let's all be very nice and be reasonable. Probably the fine print, the devil is in the fine print.
The devil is very much in the fine print. Yes, Thunderous?
And I'm just saying, it's kind of ironic that these people have a mere material view. So everything in that list is meaningless if your worldview is just nothing beyond the material in the first place.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, it's just waffle. It's a bunch of waffle. They don't really mean it. It becomes might makes right. And yeah, it all sounds great. It's just illusion. It all sounds wonderful. It's just illusion. Let's continue. So, yeah, the Quran and the Book of the Law. This is the Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley, right? And you can see here, Grammaton, the Tetragrammaton. The Tetragrammaton is the name of Yahweh, God, YHWH, basically the four-part name of God. But here they've got this idea. Notice there's a mixture of various ideas here. Right, so this is a mixing of multiple religions, just like Islam is a mixing of multiple religions, from paganism to who knows what. So, both the Quran and the Book of the Law, Crowley's Book of the Law, deliver a transformative divine message to humanity, rendering all prior religious revelations obsolete. And the Quran claims to supersede earlier scriptures like the Torah and the Gospel, while the Book of the Law heralds the Eon of Horus, or the Age of Horus, and it replaces all older faiths. You can see that on page 159 of the Book of the Law. It makes that claim. Now, both texts assert a divine origin and transmission. The Quran via the Archangel Gibberish, or Gabriel, or whatever, to Muhammad, and the Book of the Law via an angel or some entity called Aiwass to Crowley. And both books are considered sacred and unchangeable, and they must be preserved without alteration to maintain their purity. Thelema adopts Islamic practices such as daily prayers akin to Salat, which is the Islamic prayer. Thelemic greetings of the sun, the Liber Resh, mirror Islam's timed prayers, dawn, noon, sunset, and midnight. And the concept of Qibla, because in Crowley's religion, of course, you orient towards his house. Right? Of course. Holy shit. Sorry. You orient towards Bolsky house, his house. So guys, I'm going to start a religion. I'd like you guys I need to do a talk on whatchamacallit on what's that stupid thing again that oh gosh. The one that Tom Cruise belonged to. What's that religion now again?
Scientology.
Scientology. Heck, if I ever do a talk on Scientology, and it all comes from this Madame Blavatsky bullshit, once you get into that, it's equally ridiculous. It's just completely ridiculous. You see the same crap that these guys all took, and they mixed it, and they made their own little idea around it, but it all comes from the same garbage. It's just so funny. But yeah, so you orient towards Bolsky house, which directly references Islam's Mecca-facing prayer. So guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a religion. You can call me your Lord and Savior, and you're going to pray towards Poland, I guess. We can work something out. I'll let you guys know, okay? I'll let you guys know. So I'm going to need money for a private jet, for a Rolls Royce, and to build it a nice temple. Oh, and by the way, did you guys notice, you know that guy the Muslim guy, the weird-ass Muslim Ismaili guy that was, who wore the beanie and claimed he was the new Mahdi, he was the new resurrection of Jesus. You know that his compound was raided by like hundreds of cops because it was turned out that they were kidnapping people, they were sexually abusing people. I mean, like, holy moly, yeah, because people who believe these weird things, people who believe these things, they do some crazy things. They're hiding some crazy things, and it's always about sex, and it's always about money,
and power.
Yeah. Towards my cuckoo clock on the wall, yeah. So but anyway, I mean, when you read the stuff from L. Ron Hubbard, I mean, he wanted to make money. He basically said the best way to make money is to found a religion. And he comes up with these crazy ideas. So good God. I mean, like, seriously, how do fallible humans think that they are gods? I just don't understand it. So Crowley, shaped by his Plymouth Brethren upbringing, denounces Christianity as a slavish religion for slaves, right? Which should be dominated by Islam. He praises Islam's virility, its strength, its manliness. He praises Muhammad. He calls Muhammad a magician. He calls Muhammad a saint. And then Jesus doesn't appear on his list of saints because Jesus is weak. Christianity is weak. So he absorbs Islam. He studies Islam. He memorizes the Quran. He becomes a Muslim. He says he says the Shahada. He does the prayers every day. But yeah, nothing to do with Islam. Adolf Hitler similarly disparaged Christianity as weak, favoring a martial ethos, a warlike ethos. Those views stem from political ideology, not occultism. Well, that's what people would love us to believe, but unfortunately, the Nazi Party came literally out of an occult society founded by a Muslim. The Nazi Party, before it became the Nazi Party, was an occult society founded by a Muslim, by a Sufi. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
Yeah, I will say something that is kind of common sense for people who are not very sure as to, well, what is right or what is wrong or what to follow. Actually, it's quite simple. Look at the worst pieces of garbage in history, see what they believe, and the opposite is true. That rule normally applies. So when you see these sort of people who have this great love for Islam and this hatred for Christianity, you already should be oriented towards what is good and what is bad. You don't just look for the examples of good people, look for the examples of bad people, just do the opposite of what they believe. It's quite simple.
Just say that again, sorry, I didn't quite understand.
That when these sort of people, they are absolutely horrible. And you see that they love Islam, they hate Christianity, that is your moral compass. See someone that is horrible, and whatever they like and what they are selling, the opposite is true.
Yeah, actually, let me just bring this up quickly. So this was the guy here. Oops. So you guys might remember this dude. You may remember this guy. His compound was raided, right? So let me just open image. So this guy was claiming to be the new Mahdi. He was the new He was the new Muhammad, the new Jesus, the new Buddha. He was the new spiritual leader of the world. Everyone should follow him. Everyone should worship him and respect him and follow him. And he was right. And he came to bring all the secrets and all of that nonsense. And yeah, this guy, so his compound is raided. And let me just bring this one up. Yeah. Serious sexual offenses, like 500 cops raid his, the headquarters of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. And of course, it turns out that maybe it's not about peace and light. Yeah, so anyway, let's continue. So Crowley's fascination with Sufism, including what's called Aiwass rituals in Morocco. Now, it's odd that if you look at the Rosicrucians, who are sort of, they also claim that their origin is in like Morocco and Tunisia. So all of them are based on Sufi ideas, right? Reflects his view of its doctrines as pantheistic, emphasizing divine immanence over a personal God. So Hitler, often described as a pantheist, shared a similar rejection of theistic orthodoxy, though his worldview lacked Thelema's mystical depth. But Hitler did also claim to be a materialist, in other words, atheistic, and he was heavily influenced by Darwinism. Okay, let's have a book called The Book of Lies, right? Mohammedan magic, something worth looking at. So the book, the Thule Society, the Thule Society, that's exactly the organization that the Nazi Party came out of, and it's formed by chleb, bread. Okay. But Sufis are cool. They're like Muslim hippies. Yeah, no. Absolutely not. Yeah, so, yeah, the Mahdi lives in Crewe, apparently, yeah. So, and then of course you've got Fischl Benkold. As a Jew, I respect all world religions. All world religions teach peace and harmony. Now, the only correct answer to that is bullshit. When you understand Islam, when you look at its doctrines, it teaches domination, teaches violence, it teaches enmity and hatred to all non-Muslims forever. Right, so yeah, keep telling yourself that nonsense. So, yep, so let me continue. So yeah, now Crowley was very fascinated with Mohammedan magic or Muslim magic, right? Anyone can twist any scripture to suit their personal desires and agenda. And while that is true, you're still talking bullshit, because Islam explicitly has extremely, I'm not just talking about the Quran, when you look at the Sharia, it has pages and pages, hundreds of pages, dozens of pages, explaining things like cutting off of hands, sex with minors, including infants in the cradle. It has numerous sections discussing jihad, which is the violent oppression of the non-Muslim, and so on. So yeah, keep lying to yourself. And yeah, but that's, yeah, honestly, bullshit. So let me go on. Yeah, he really does need to read the Sharia law manuals, and you'll notice that it's not misinterpretation or twisting. It is a direct one-to-one application of exactly the way that Islamic law is written. So yeah, anyway, let's go on. So he was fascinated with Muslim magic, right, which is Islamic mysticism and Sufism. In the context of the book, a lie, as Crowley writes it, is any statement expressed in language, because ultimate truth is beyond words. So anything we say is automatically a lie. The truth is beyond words. And any attempt to describe it is a lie or distortion. Isn't that so convenient? So everyone's lying, nothing is true. So there you go.
So that would be a direct challenge when Jesus says your word is truth.
Say again, sorry, say that again.
So that would be a direct challenge to Jesus' words when Jesus himself says, referring to scripture,
yes,
your word is truth.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly so. Yeah, exactly so. Yeah, we're going to have to assume that Fischl is rage baiting or trolling. I'm going to have to make that assumption. No one can be that ignorant. Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So obviously it's making it convenient. So everything we say is a lie. So nothing is true. Therefore you are true. Therefore it's all just subjective again. And then Kabbalistic cryptography, right? The book has 91 chapters, each usually a single page of cryptic verse or aphorism. It's the inverse of 19, right? The number that Muslims love so much. Oh, Fischl Benkoud. I live in Pakistan. I have a business here. You can check my interview involved. I feel safe in Pakistan. Pakistan Jews stand with Pakistan. You're a fucking idiot. Sorry, Fischl. Now fuck off. If someone can just put him in, just mute him for 24 hours. This guy's another twat. I'm sorry. I just have no respect for this. This is idiocy on. This is idiocy on a This is a Muslim pretending. Official Benkal is obviously just the Muslim, and he's just here trolling. It's that simple, you know. Yeah, it's not even worth talking with this guy because the guy's just really just a troll here to lie to us. So yeah, just put him in timeout for 24 hours. I think that'll be nice. It's not worth listening to this fool.
He's obviously been on the camel urine too much. He needs to limit his drinking of that.
Exactly. So yeah. So anyway, excuse my French, but really he deserved it. So okay, moving on. So the book is 91 chapters, but each is usually a single page of cryptic verse or aphorisms. In other words, little supposedly true sayings, little sayings and things. Each chapter corresponds to a specific Kabbalistic sub-meaning of its number. It was intended as an advanced textbook, right, for his occult order to train the mind to think in symbols rather than logic. So this is a way of detaching from reality, detaching from reason and logic, so that you can think in a way that is subjective. This is very similar to the whole Sufi and the Muslim idea of the letters at the end of these random letters at the end of Islamic chapters of the Quran, you use them as mantras to disassociate from the real, to disconnect your mind from the cage, the prison of reason, so you can enter into these pre-rational and post-rational states and then commune with Allah. So Crowley used the book to provoke samadhi, or spiritual ecstasy, by forcing the reader's logic to fail, so it is irrational. And I do want to mention that also when you read Martin Luther's work, for instance, on reason, when you read his final work on reason, his final sermon on reason, printed and published about 3 weeks before his death, he says that reason is Satan's whore, that reason, that logic is Satan's greatest tool, and that we need to take poop and smear it in reason's face. We need to trample on reason. Reason is evil. Reason is wrong. Reason is a whore to the devil, and we must avoid it. And here, well, Crowley doesn't exactly say it in that sense. He also wants to force you to avoid logic. So by presenting contradictory statements such as the universe is a rejection of God, so the universe is a rejection of God, he aimed to bypass the rational intellect known as the ruach to reach the higher intuition. So it's everything to reject God and accept your own subjective sense. And he frequently referred to Mohammedan magic, right? Muslim magic, right? This is his term for Islamic and Arab or Islamic occultism. And he admired the rigorous monotheism of Islam and the intoxicated or drunken devotion found in Sufi poetry, seeing it as a parallel to his own magic of the world. Any thoughts before I go on?
I was just thinking there, when everyone seems to be challenging the power of reason, and yet again, that's another direct challenge to the Apostle Paul's words in Romans 1:20.
Yeah, what does he say there in that?
For his invisible qualities are clearly seen from the world's creation onward, because they are perceived by the things made. So his eternal power and Godship is without excuse. Your power of perception is also your power of reason, because you're looking at something and you're analyzing it and you're determining, the mind behind it, as it were, or the beauty or the purpose behind it.
Yeah. You know that science began as an outgrowth of Christian thought, because unlike the atheists, Christians believed that we had a rational creator who created a rational, understandable world. And because we were created in his image, we could understand to some degree his thought. And that because we are rational beings, the world was rational and God was rational, and we could determine the laws that founded the world. That doesn't mean we had perfect knowledge, but it means we could comprehend that. And therefore, as a culture, Christians created science. They created they started to create mathematics. They started to develop technology. And we are so far ahead of any other culture we were, and we shared that with the world because we believed in a rational God. Whereas you look at these atheists and others, they believe that there is no rationality. There's only, there's just randomness and chaos. And there was no point in even trying to understand. Islam teaches that Allah moves everything, literally where every raindrop falls or when it falls and how fast it falls. Whereas from a Christian point of view, we say, no, there is the science, there's the laws of nature, right? We have a completely different sense of what is science versus what Islam believes is science. So, yeah. Any thoughts, JC, before I go on? Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually do two comments on this. One is, so in Islam, that's exactly what happens. One of the techniques that they use is the many contradictions, and it happens even from the Quran and then the traditions. For example, what we said before, do good deeds, but then they will tell you good deeds means go and attack the infidel. It will
Yeah.
have contradictions, such as God created everything in 6 days, and then it says created everything in 8 days within the Quran. So when you are holding two thoughts in your head that you must believe them both, but they contradict each other, that causes a lot of problems and you are easily manipulated. The outcome of all of that is that now when you show 26 different Qurans to the Muslims and you say no book before the printing press was free of scribal errors, you have 26. Actually, you have many, many more.
At least
And you show the
45. Yeah.
sources.
45
Yeah.
known canonical versions of the Quran, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, they will still point at that and say, no, there is only one Quran perfectly preserved. So they will deny what is in front of their very eyes because of all of that word magic and everything that you are describing here with Crowley.
Yeah. No, I actually was preparing a section on this whole science of Islam. Turns out not to be Western science at all. It's in many cases, we'll probably have to leave it for the next show, but science in Islam is about rhetoric. It's about science of words and language, of manipulation, of deception, and it's the science of the occult. So it's not about logic and reason and mathematics and physics. It's not that. They have a very vastly different idea of science. So it's the science of that Muhammad brought, the science of the understanding of the spiritual world, personal development. We know Islam is barbaric and backwards, but they believe they have the true science, the greatest science. So they have science like law and they have science like physics, but really they borrowed all of that, stole all of that, plagiarized it from the West for the most part. So yeah, they're all sophists, atheistic science. Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. Atheists have the idea of the multiverse because they would rather invent an idea that there's a multitude, millions and millions of worlds than say that there's one God.
Can I just expand on that?
1 second, Bill. But look, honestly, just tell an atheist, well, sadly for you, we happen to live in that one multiverse where God exists. Too bad.
I've read the book, The Devil's Delusion by Dr. David Belinsky, and he puts it this way. He says,
yeah, I have
when you look
at a great book, yeah.
Yeah, where he turns around and says things like, we're living in a universe that will forever expand, therefore the gravitational pull on certain galaxies will weaken and therefore the planet will float off into infinity and we will freeze. Then you have the universe that contracts and then we'll just burn up as all the particles come together at a single point. Then we have the oscillating universe where it goes in, out, in, out, in, out.
And that one's been debunked already. Yeah,
yeah, I know, but this is what then you have the multiverse, then you have the universe within the universe, and the way that Dr. Belinsky puts it, he says anything is better than nothing, nothing is better than God. That's the sum total of the atheist mind. We will accept anything. It's a bit like the origin of life now, or abiogenesis, where they will say we either came from primordial soup, we came on the back of crystals, we maybe have come about via hydro vents, or even panspermia, where life came through a process of meteorites hitting the planet. Yet again, anything is better than nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, it's sophistry. It's everything to avoid God. Even Crowley's nonsense. It's anything to avoid or defy God. I mean, it's not that they don't believe in God; they defy God. Yeah, but just look at the lengths people will go to defy God, to avoid natural law. It's just crazy. And I mean, the alignment with Islam. JC, you've got this image up.
Yes, kept saying about the multiverse. So I just remember this meme, which I thought Thandros would appreciate. I found it to be very, very funny.
Yeah, the Lord is an avenger. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so yeah, there you go. So Crowley frequently referred to Mohammedan magic, Muslim magic, his ears term. Okay, so he admired their rigorous monotheism and their intoxicated devotion, right, to Sufi poetry. And in Algiers in 1909, much of Crowley's understanding of Islamic magic was forged during his travels in the North African desert with a man called Victor Neuberg. It was here while performing the Enochian calls, right? Enoch, the book of Enoch, of course, that he immersed himself in the local Islamic culture, often dressing in Islamic robes, and he adopted the persona of a wandering Sufi. And then the cry of the 14th Aether, in the vision and the voice, a text related to the themes in the Book of Lies, he describes encounters that mirror the Islamic concept of fana, the annihilation of the self. Now, this is a concept with Gnostics where you go through different stages, different stations, and you annihilate different aspects of your being, the things that bind you to earth, that trap you inside the prison of the flesh, inside the prison of reason, and you eventually become free, and you enter into these post-rational states where you can go through the veil and you can enter into Allah's throne room, and you can then merge, you can make communion with Allah, you become like him. You are so pure and so holy, you enter into the throne room with Allah. You become one essence with him. In other words, you become God. Just a very, very complicated way of becoming God. It's atheists, we are the highest of creation, we are God, but with lots of extra steps, lots of rituals and magic.
Is that the one where they do the spinning, Lloyd, or is that something different?
Yeah, that's a way of detaching yourself. Yeah, it's like you become spiritually intoxicated. You detach from the rational, and you enter these post-rational, pre-rational states. Yeah,
but it's done through physical motion of dancing and spinning.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah, that's one of their rituals. So, and the Sufi path of losing oneself in God is the ultimate magical act.
Yeah.
So he was deep into Islam. He was deep into Sufism. So, so I think we'll end off shortly soon. But yeah, so the science of Mohammedan magic. So Crowley drew parallels between Islam, meaning submission to God's will, and his own central tenet: "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." We've already covered what that means, but it becomes whatever you want it to mean, I guess. So to Crowley, true will was not doing what you want, but submitting your ego to your divine purpose. So you submit your wayward mind to your divine purpose. Your divine purpose is to become like God. If you think about it, you are entering into his throne room. You are pure enough to pierce the veil and to enter into the room, the same room as God, basically. So you need to still your wayward mind, and you need to make your will take you there. So you become like God. So throughout his writings, and specifically in parts of the Book of Lies, Crowley references the jinns. The jinns, that's a Buddhist concept, right, guys? Jinns, that's very Buddhist. Or is that, I can't remember. Is that Christian? Does Jesus talk about jinns, or does someone else?
I thought jinns was a Gordon's concept.
A what?
A Gordon's concept. They make London gin.
Ah, okay. So, okay, I thought you said Geordies or something. You know, I don't know. It could be Mormonite. I have no idea. But jinns, I think it could be something to do with Muhammad. The 99 names of Allah. Oh, that's the God of Buddhism, right? And the secret of the Kaaba. That's the Buddhist holy shrine, I think. So yeah, and he viewed these not just as myths, but as potent psychological and astral keys for the modern magician. So Islam holds the keys for you to become a potent magician. And the hymn to Pan, right? This is an ecstatic rhythmic invocation designed to channel raw creative energy and primordial force through the identification of the magician with the universal God of nature. So he believed that, you see, nature is God. You see? So basically, being one with nature is being one with God. So that's the whole pantheistic idea. But then, of course, then tomorrow you'll find he said something else that contradicts that. But so, and he compared that idea, his hymn to Pan, with the Islamic call to prayer. Let me just see if I can. Sorry, oh, bugger. Give me 1 second. Let me just bring this back. I want to try and find this link that he had. Let me see this hymn to Pan. I have a link here. Let me see if I can bring this up. Oh, here we go. The hymn to Pan. So this is like a poem, like Sufi poetry. Thrill with listen lust of light. Oh man, my man, come careering out of the night of Pan, O Pan. Come over the sea from Sicily, from Arcady, roaming as Bacchus with fawns and pods, and nymph and satyrs for thy gods. On a milk-white ass, come over the sea, to me, to me. So guys, this is going to elevate you to the status of a demigod. You're going to reach the greatest level of mental, spiritual, occultic, magical development by saying, hold on, hang on, let me just get this. This is
Lloyd.
Yeah.
Lloyd, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, you've just found a surah like it.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, guys, we need to. I'm going to go to the next level after this crap is the sun did not shine. It was too wet to play. So we sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day. I sat there with Sally. We sat there with two, and I said how I wish we had something to do. Too wet to go out and too cold to play ball. So we sat in the house. We did nothing at all. And then we looked and we saw him step in on the mat. We looked and we saw him, the cat in the hat. And he said to us, "Why do you sit there like that? I know it is wet and the sun is not sunny, but we can have fun. We can have lots of good fun that is funny." So yeah, I guess this is like the second level after that. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that if I remember correctly, Aleister Crowley used to write poetry, a lot of poetry, especially when he was at college. So do you think that there could be a direct correlation with the fact that the Quran itself is basically poetry? Now, the difficulty is, did Aleister Crowley learn Arabic? Because when you get the translation, it becomes a mess. So if you learned it in Arabic, if you learned Arabic and you could read the Quran in Arabic, then there could be a correlation between his own writing of or appreciation of poetry and also the Quran's rhythmic patterns of poetry. Do you think there's a correlation there?
I think so. I mean, it's these ideas of, you say this crap to lose detachment with your rational mind, and they put you in various states. It's to get away from reason. God is reason, right? God is the logos. It's logic.
The reason why I say that is because he did a book, didn't he? He did a book of poems called The White Stains. And
but that's come on, you know what that means already, right?
I know what it means. I was just going to go to the hadith where Aisha was scratching off a lot of white stains.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting correlation there.
There is.
Very minimum.
Yeah. But his own little poem, he believed was very similar to the azan, right? That's what the Muslims scream at 5 a.m. in the morning to wake you up in New York, right? As they say in New York, Allahu Akbar, right? So now he was fascinated by the sonic power, the sound power of the adhan, right? The Islamic call to prayer. And he believed that the vibration of words had a unique effect in shifting consciousness, similar to the way that he structured what he called the barbarous names, right? Long strings of ancient, unintelligible, or corrupted words. Just like those words in the Quran that no one knows what they mean at the end of these chapters, right? Often derived from Gnostic, Egyptian, or Akkadian fragments that Crowley used in rituals to exhaust the mind. That's exactly what the Sufis say, that the words at the end of the Quran, those nonsense words like alif, lim, mam, they are used in exactly the same way. In rituals, they are rhymed to disconnect you from reality so that you can get lost in blah, blah nonsense. Any thoughts, you guys?
Yeah, I will just say, adding to what Thunder said, whether there is a connection there. Well, if this guy actually created a Qibla, making people actually pray to him, to his home, and he imposed his Sharia, the Sharia of Crowley, and all of these other references, I think you have a very good point that this guy was very familiar with what was happening with Islam. Maybe he actually used that as the blueprint to make himself the new Muhammad and to make himself basically a God on earth, because in Islam, as much as Muslims will say that they pray to Allah, they pray to Muhammad, everything is about Muhammad, they obey Muhammad, and so on. So I think he just copy-pasted and said, I'm going to do just that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So agreed. I mean, I think you guys are on fire today. Some really great comments. For instance, Sandra says, you overload your brain with nonsense to break logical thought, like Zen anecdotes. Exactly. And then we have here from Panonsky, at the highest state, you find there is no Allah, that people who reach those heights are some kind of superhuman. I've heard that from a guy who went through it a lot. And that is exactly something that is prevalent in the history of Islam as well with these Sufis. That's exactly it. So ultimately, the connection between the Book of Lies and Mohammedan magic or Muslim magic represents Crowley's attempt to create a universal magic. He wanted to strip away the superstition of religion to find the underlying science. And when you look, because he studied Islamic science, you start to find it's not very scientific. It's a lot about fancy word magic. It's a lot about fancy nonsense sophistry. It's a lot about the occult. It's not about what we would consider rational modern science. And remember, he founded a religion given to him by an angel or some deity, that was the final book. He was the final prophet. Understand? So yeah, this is very, very similar to what we found with Islam. So I'll pause here. I think this is good place to stop for tonight. I will go through some of that Islamic magic for the next time. Hold on, actually, let me just bring this up. For instance, I'll give you an idea, just a taste. The science of huruf, right? The ahruf, onomatomancy, a magical practice. We don't call magic a science. We don't call the occult a science, except for the people deep into that stuff. But that's not science, right? It's a magical practice based on the occult properties of the alphabet and the divine and angelic names which they form. But this is specifically referring to the Quran, right? So this is the science of the ahruf. So the ahruf is actually about creating magic, about summoning demons, about summoning angels, gaining control, gaining influence, getting power, right? And using the Quran as a magical book of ritual, right? For instance, ilm, science, knowledge, the result of laborious study, right? Like ilm al-asarir, divination, chiromancy. Thunderous, you spoke of that earlier. Divination, telling the future. Chiromancy, right? Seeing the future and so on. And the knowledge of religious obligations, right? So this is witchcraft. I thank you very much for that, Catherine. Witchcraft. And finally here, ilm al-azaim, the talismanic art, consisting of calling upon jinns and angels for the performance of projects on earth, getting physical things done, right? Ilm al-shari, revealed knowledge, right? That's the sharia. But notice the science of rhyme, the science of, there's many others. There's many of these pages in the books that I found. Science of rhetoric, science of convincing people, like hypnosis and shit. What do you guys think of that?
Well, for this thing, like with words, is before when you said the first time about word magic, I thought, okay, well, that's just going to be psychology. I think there is another element to it, but psychology is a great part of it. I remember this guy, Darren Brown, explaining how he could, make people believe or accept something without reason and doing these things. And it's by the use of actual language that can hijack the brain. Basically, psychology is very advanced psychology. So all of these things about doing either repetitions of rhythmic things, they all have a purpose. And how would they get that information? Maybe because they were incredibly clever, maybe by luck and through trial and error, but certainly they do influence people and not in a good way.
Yeah. Last word to you, Thunderous. I mean, today you guys were on fire and some great comments. Thank you. I can't always pay attention because I'm also looking at the comments, but Thunderous, today you made some really insightful comments. I mean, you said some things that I thought were very, very thought-provoking as well.
Thank you, dude. The only question I've got is when we continue this, and thank you for inviting me on this week's discussion, is will you be looking into the influences Aleister Crowley has had on people moving forward in future, like the Beatles, the lead singer of Black Sabbath, or Led Zeppelin? Because they all...
The thing is, I could, but the thing is there's really so much on Crowley. I've got a ton of stuff here. It's like I got to draw the line somewhere. Like, for instance, it would be more useful for me to talk about... I was thinking, but you're right, because this magic influenced the culture, it influenced music, especially the 50s, no, the 60s, especially the 60s and the 70s. This stuff spilled over into the music industry. It
in a very big way,
and
not with small people as well. We're talking the major players of the 60s, 70s, and 80s either reference him in artistry on their album covers, or they reference him directly by name in song, or they reference is "Do What Thou Will." I think Janet Jackson is famous for that, and the Pleasure Principle. So in one way or another,
good point.
Cite him.
So tell you what, can you make some notes on that? And the next time we have this talk, you bring those up and you talk about them. Can you make some notes and we'll talk about that? Because I think it's worth it. In fact, you know what? That is something I could do, because the music industry especially was infested with this stuff in the 60s. It's crazy how bad it was. It's crazy how that happened. I was
to say, as an example, people can look at the Beatles cover of the Sgt. Major's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, sorry, and he's actually on the cover there in one part of the image, because it's a photo shot of many people in there. He's actually in one top right corner.
Let me just show.
So one shouldn't consider. I don't think people should consider him some irrelevant piece of history. This is a major player as far as influence.
So
Influence
where is his image? Let's look for him.
There he is. Top, go up, go up, go up. Top, second one.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, right there. So hold on. Let me just let me just capture that. Give me 1 second. He's right here. Let me just bring it up. There he is. Top left corner, second guy. That's him right there. Yeah. Yeah. So this story is a lot worse than people realize. This stuff infected the music world. And but yeah, so what did you guys take away? So what did you guys take away from this? And for the audience, I mean, hopefully you've learned something. You've seen Islam is very compatible with Satanism. Satanism sounds a lot like humanism, the Enlightenment, secular culture. They use words like compassion and love and sit down and be reasonable and talk things through. But they're Satanists. They mean none of it. Yeah.
You know, if you had to use the word, you'd have to use the word doublespeak from
Say
directly
again?
from 19.
The
From the
what?
book 1984, they will call it doublespeak.
Okay. Yeah. So tomorrow is my next live. I'm doing the last portion. We've only got about 20 slides to go. Just a few. It's like 17 slides maybe of monotheism. So that's the last one I'll do tomorrow with JC. Then on Tuesday, I have Usama. Usama wants to talk about how Islam has infiltrated the Democratic Party, which is very disturbing. So he wants to do a few episodes on that. So I guess we'll do that on Tuesday. And then, so the Democratic Party is definitely the mouthpiece. I mean, just like Labour is the mouthpiece of Islam these days. And at some point, people, this is going to blow up. I don't see how it's not going to. I don't see how this is not going to. Conflict is coming. It's unfortunate, but it's coming. And
Agreed.
Yeah. So guys, that's it. Hopefully this all made sense. You can see Islam and Satanism are highly compatible. That all of them are anti-Christian, and all of this stuff is just severe nonsense. But what can you do? Last words, guys.
Thank you to you, Lloyd. Thank you to JC. Thank you for putting this material together, Lloyd. Yet again, you are the only one that seems to be going in directions that other YouTube channels don't want to go, particularly with the influence of Islam in many different areas, and those areas that have gone on to influence certain genres of entertainment that we're all influenced by. So thank you for that, Lloyd. Thank you for your contribution, JC. And I'd like to thank to everybody in the audience in the chat for their comments and their participation.
Welcome. Yeah, JC, from you.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys, and thank you to everybody watching. This has been really, really interesting, and I look forward to these topics becoming mainstream in the next few years.
Yeah. Guys, I was in Germany for a week, and I mean, normies at a table started talking about Islam. I said nothing. I don't tell people, I don't talk to people and tell them I have a YouTube channel and an online personality. I don't speak about that stuff, right? But these normies were talking about Islam. There's a Muslim woman at the table, and everyone started saying, yeah. And people were saying things, normies were saying things that apologists would normally talk about. I was amazed. The things that we talk about here are becoming mainstream, and people are very turned off by Islam. People are disgusted. And even Muslims have to, you know, obviously she was alone. She was very nice. She's more secular than Muslim, I would say. But then again, I mean, put her in a group and, you know, things change. But yeah, it's people are talking about these things. It actually is filtering through, and it might be late, but the war's not over yet. We are going to win this. I never heard any guru using his power to seduce girls. Of course not. So guys, thank you very much. We'll call it a night here. I hope this has been educational. Talk to people. Please understand, Islam is very compatible with Satanism. It is extremely compatible with totalitarianism. And it is something that is beloved of the great totalitarians and Satanists of the last 2 centuries. So yeah, think about that. And they all hate Christianity for a reason. So guys, good night. God bless. And that's what I've been telling you, Lloyd. I'm hearing it everywhere. Oh, wow, Catherine. Thank you very much. So yes. So guys, thank you. Please do like. Please give it a like, please. Every time you hit the like button, 10 more people get informed by the YouTube algorithm of the shows. So please hit the like button. YouTube then shares it with 10 more people. Please subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. Talk about these things. learn them. And yeah, for those who do support the channel, thank you very much. It's always very much appreciated. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this kind of work, all the research. I've got to take time off from my personal life, of course, but I do it because I think we have to talk about this. But thank you for supporting that. And if you'd like to support the channel, links down below. And yeah, guys, we shall see you tomorrow night. Take care and God bless everyone.